In this video we'll set up linting for our TypeScript project. So linting is a program that analyzes our code to detect for any bad coding practices. So we can essentially customize certain rules such that we enforce a consistent way we write JavaScript code. So an example would be having single quotes instead of double quotes throughout our JavaScript, or in this case TypeScript. So there's two main linters available for TypeScript projects, and that's the TSLint and the ESLint. And TypeScript, they've suggested that TSLint will eventually be deprecated, and they'll be supporting ESLint in the future because of the performance benefits ESLint has. So going forward, we'll start to incorporate ESLint into our TypeScript projects. We'll also incorporate the Prettier code formatting rules such that there are no conflicts between Prettier and ESLint. So the first thing that we'd like to do is we'll go to our extensions here in Visual Studio Code, and we'll just get ESLint, and we also want to get Prettier. So make sure that you have those two extensions. I've already got them. So once you have those extensions, what we can do is we can press Control and a comma, and they'll open up our settings. And in the settings, in the search bar, we can just type for Prettier, and we can take a look at the we can just add a few things in here. So for example, this is sort of our settings for Prettier. So if I just typed in a single quote, for example, and you can click that, and then when you save your files, it'll make anywhere that you type the string with double quotes into single quotes. And there's a whole bunch of other settings for Prettier in there, and later we'll customize a few of these properties. And the other thing that we want to do is, for that formatting to apply, we have to add the setting format on save, and to do that you obviously have to have some sort of formatter available. So make sure you download the Prettier formatter, and then when you save the file, then they'll change it. So that's sort of getting started. Now what we'll need to do, if we haven't already have these already, is install, so npm I, and we'll install these globally, and they'll be ESLint and TypeScript. So we'll go ahead and get those, and obviously we're going to need Node here, so make sure you have Node for Node Package Manager. And okay, so we've got those in our project, or in our global workspace. So now what we can do is we can initialize a new project with npm init, and we'll just do a -y to skip all of the questions, and that will generate this package.json file for us. Now the only thing I'm going to change here is I'm going to change this script to the TypeScript, so the entry point of the main script is going to be in the index.ts, and I'll make that in a little bit. But firstly we'll get set up with the ESLinting. And one thing to note with ESLinting, there's an Airbnb style guide, and that offers a bunch of predefined rules to help us write JavaScript more consistently, and we'll be following their suggestions for linting, but we'll also see how we can customize our own and all of that as well. So okay, so what we can do is we need to add some dependencies, but developer dependencies, because these won't be used in our actual project. They're just used to, make sure we have a good experience. So we can just install ESLint, TypeScript, ESLint config -airbnb-TypeScript, and that's Airbnb's TypeScript linting configuration. We also want ESLint, we want a plugin, and import, and we'll get the latest version, and that's at the current is 2.20.1, And I should note, I'm getting this from the npm.js package website for the ESLint config Airbnb TypeScript, so you could go ahead and, in our case, we're not going to use React. This will just be for a TypeScript project, but if you're using React, you can go ahead and install it as follows. But with no React support, I'm essentially just getting these latest versions here and I'm saving them as dev. So I'll just go ahead and I'll continue to write that out. Well, I may as well copy it since I'm here. This one at least. And okay. So in the command line in git bash, so we've got that, and then I'll get the TypeScript ESLint plugin, and that should do for now. So I'll go ahead and install that. And what this should do for us once it's loaded is in the package.json we'll be able to see the dev dependencies in, okay, there they are, they just appeared there, so we've got those 5 there. Okay, so now what we can do is we can create a ESLint configuration file. So these will be our run commands, so we can go ahead and create the new file .eslint.json. And okay, so what we can do is we can go back to that website, and they've actually got a JavaScript file here, but I like the JSON file, so I'll just go ahead and modify this a little bit here. And okay, so what I can do is I can change this into a object, and I can put make this into JSON, and I'll just go ahead and I'll Control D these last few single quotes, and I'll also get this one here like that, delete that, delete that. So we've got a basic ESLint run command configuration, which just extends this Airbnb TypeScript base which we've installed from that package there. So another thing that we need to do is we need to create a TS file. So because it's a TypeScript project, we can just go ahead and we can run a tsc-init, and what that will do is that will generate the our tsconfig.json, and that's sort of where this pass options project is looking at. So that's just the standard TypeScript compiler options, and you know, maybe it converts it down into ES5 into the modern version for more browser compatibility. So anyway, we can go ahead and we can close that. Now we've generated that. So what we can do now is we can actually well, let's actually just create that file so we can see. So we can go ahead and create index.ts, and okay, so if we do something like have a constant variable of x, and that's equal to say 5 for example, we'll notice that we get this red underlines, and this is the ESLinter in action. So we can already see that it's saying, okay, we haven't used this console, we haven't used this variable, so we get an error. But then if we console logged it, so I've used CLG with the JavaScript snippets, and that's another extension, now that red underline goes away. And there's a couple more, and we'll get more into like the ESLinting in just a minute, but I want to just continue to set up the configuration for this. And so to point out these errors, so let's just go ahead and delete this, and we'll get these 2 errors here. What we can do is we can run the command ESLint, so we installed that earlier, and so we have access to that, and we can use this dot here, and what that will do is they'll be all of our files, and we want to have the TypeScript file extension type that we're looking for, so we don't care about any other ones. And by default this should ignore node modules, so we can just do a --ext.ts. And so, okay, so we do that, and we get in the console, in the terminal, the two errors, and they're the same errors that we got pointed out over here. So the X is assigned but never reused, and there's a expected line breaks to be LF but found CRLF, and that's just we'll actually go ahead and we'll turn this off, and that's just to do with the line breaking on different operating systems. Like I believe Linux has a different sort of spacing at the end or something like that. A carriage return instead of I don't know, a tab and a carriage return, but we'll turn that off anyway. But I just wanted to use this script, and since we'll be using this script often, I wanted to add it to the package.json. So we'll go ahead and we'll just delete this script here, and we'll just call it lint. So we can just go ahead and copy that command there, ESLint, and it will lint all our files. And you could lint a specific file if you wanted to, or get more into the types of files you want, but we'll do the TypeScript example. And okay, so now when we run an npm run lint, what we can do is we should expect the same thing to occur. And okay, so yes, and we do get those errors there. And if we were to say just delete everything and then run a npm run lint, and there should only be one line at the end as well, so that's an error as well. And this just sort of enforces good styling, consistent writing code, then we don't get all those extra errors there. But obviously we don't want to just delete our code to not have the errors, we want to handle them sort of more gracefully. But that's just to set up the script. So sort of continuing on from there, what we could do is, well, one thing we might like to do is we might like to add Prettier. And if you're familiar with Prettier at all, I think you might have even seen it from before. If I did a console log of say 4, and then I don't have anything at the end there, like a semicolon, but then I save it, what Prettier will do is it will automatically add a colon to the end, and it will format our code correctly with a nice indentation that we've specified and all that. But right now we need to set that up, and we're getting that line break error thing, so we want to fix that up as well. And okay, so before we actually what we might do is we might okay, no, we'll install the Prettier first, and then we'll get into the rules. So what I'll do is I'll just run a npm install, and this will be another dev dependency, and I'll install Prettier ESLint config-Prettier, so we can configure our ESLint with Prettier, and ESLint -plugin-Prettier. So ESLint config Prettier is a config that disables rules that conflict with Prettier, and ESLint plugin Prettier is a plugin that adds a rule that formats content using Prettier. So if you take a look at our package.json, we should see that they've been added as dev dependencies. So now that we have those, what we can do is we can take a look back at our ESLint run commands, and in this sort of configuration file, not only do we want to extend the Airbnb TypeScript base, but we also want to use Prettier, and because we just installed the plugin, we can just use the recommended Prettier plugin, and that what that will do is that will actually apply those two packages that we just installed as dev dependencies. So So we can go ahead and we can save that. And now with that, there's two ways we can change our Prettier run command. And the first we've seen by going into our settings with a control comma, and then, you know, change the single quote or something like that. But we can also, just like we've got these run commands for ESLint, we can also make a run commands for Prettier. So we can just do Prettier rc, and we'll just have something really basic here. So in our Prettier rc file, we'll just say, okay, we'll have single, and you get the IntelliSense here as well in this file, so that's cool. We'll set single quote to true, and one thing that we're getting is we're getting this end of line error. So something we can also turn off is this, set this end of line to auto. We can go ahead and we can save that, and with that now, you know, let's say we didn't have that semicolon, we save it, it gets to that semicolon, and we've also turned off that, you know, that end of line issue that we're having with that. So the Airbnb style guide, they don't want any console logs hanging around. So usually when you're developing and you know, you chuck in a console log here and there to look at what sort of data you got or something like that, but it shouldn't normally be left in the code. So a rule by them is to not allow, well, you know, point out the errors of that. But what we can do in this ESLint, we can actually have our own rules, and well, we can override the rules. So we're extending the Airbnb TypeScript base rules, but we can specify rules that they have, and we can just turn them off. And if you want to know what rules they have, that you can look at that on that Airbnb GitHub website as well that they got there. But you know, they're pretty standard sort of, you know, rules that allow for cleaner code, so you can just go ahead and just use them. But what we can do is we can turn this no console rule, and we can turn that off if we wish. So what will that do? That will just make it so there's no errors in our code. But I'm going to turn that off here because I just want to demonstrate how to turn certain rules myself. So I'll go ahead and I'll save that, and you know, we get this squiggly line here again. So okay, so now that we've got ESLint set up for our TypeScript without React and with Prettier, what we might want to do is just see it in action. Like, what is it actually doing? And okay, so let's just code, and let's just say we're writing some code, and you know, we want to make an add function, and x plus y, and then we make a constant for x, we make a constant for y. We have that there like that. We get these errors here. I'm like, oh, okay, what are these? Okay, so the constant's never used, so since it's never used, it points that out as an unused variable, and that could easily happen when you're writing code. You might declare a couple of variables and your code's really long or complicated, and you know, you forget about them, and it turns out you don't need them anymore. Well, this just sort of points that out for you, so that's cool. But let's say we wanted to, there was some sort of reason why these variables weren't used, and it has this error. We can turn off these errors, and we do that inside this sort of / asterisk sort of quote comment thing. And to turn off the ESLint for this entire file, what we can do is we can run this ESLint-disable. But the problem with this is, you know, obviously we want to see the rules. We don't want to, you know, ignore all the rules. So what we could do is we could put this before a certain section, and then enable the rules again with the ESLint enable, and that will point out the error again. But that sort of isn't necessarily what we want either, because it's too generic in the sense it's not specifically telling us which errors, and we may be looking for some other errors if we had a block of code in between here, but not looking for other errors, for example. And to get around this, what we can do instead is we can okay, so let's say just down here, so everything below this enable is, so all the ESLinting's enabled again. So let's say we want to do a console log, and we just wanted a console log 6, let's say. Let's do 7, and we have this console log. If we hover over with our mouse, we can see right at the end there we get this ESLint no console, and that no console is the rule we want to specify. So we can just go ahead and add our comment with the ESLint before it, and disable, and we can add that no console there like that, and now we don't get a console error. But if I say if this will apply for all console errors below, so maybe we only wanted that on 1, for example, and to make it apply for just 1, well, firstly I'll need to enable that rule again. I might just copy that and paste that like that and change disable to enable. So now we can see that this points that error back out for us. But let's say, rather than doing this enable thing again, what we can do instead is we can just run an ESLint disable and next line, and that we can just do that by itself. But let's say in that line that we had multiple sort of errors there. That's not pointing out to us, but you could imagine very easily a circumstance where there's more than one error in the same line of code, but we might want to ignore one error but not the other. So for that reason, we need to be more specific, and it's better practice to be more specific. And since we're doing linting for best practices, best coding JavaScript practices, it's good to follow the best practices. So if we disable the next line, we should say what line we're disabling. So we could say ESLint disable next line, no console, and you can also achieve the same sort of thing. So that means if you have another console log, that will be pointed out, and you can do a similar thing like inline, I suppose. So rather than disable next line, you could do an ESLint disable line and no console, and that should let's see. Okay, so that's just for without the specific thing that we're doing, but the drawback of this is you lose out on what we just mentioned previously. So we obviously would like to go for something like this in most circumstances. Well, actually, we want to be coding so we're not disabling the rules at all. But obviously you need some exceptions, and you've got to do things in certain situations and overcome it, and refactor it later. So like maybe perhaps why you're doing that, or you just need it in your code, and you can disable the lines. But use it sparingly, but when you do use it, sort of go for this sort of one here. And I'll just show you one last thing, and now it's turning off multiple things. So let's just say I had a function here, and I'll just call this add, and let's say it takes an x, it takes a y, and what we'll do is it will return x plus y. So we save that, and immediately spaces it out for us with the Prettier extension. But if we didn't have that Prettier going, we could see that a space is required after a comma between parameters and stuff like that. So that's just another rule that gets pointed out to us. So right now we've got a couple errors. Since we're using TypeScript, we may as well, say that that's a number. That's a number, and the return's going to be a number as well. But we still get these errors here, and what these errors are saying is x is already declared in the upper scope. So we made this variable x, we made this variable y, and since they're already in the upper scope, part of this style rule by Airbnb setup is to not shadow variables, and you don't really want to shadow variables anyway. Although it's probably not the worst if you were to do it in this situation. And let's say, and then also we never use the function as well, so just like declaring a function but not using it for a variable, the same applies for the functions. But let's say we wanted to turn off both of these at the same time. We could use this ESLint disable next line thing. But okay, so you can just hover over, and I might just get rid of that so I can see the error. You can see we've got this @TypeScript-ESLint non-use var, so I might turn that off, and I might turn this no shadow off as well. So obviously we don't want to necessarily be disabling all these rules. They're there so we can write better code and change this to an A and B and not have it shadowing and use it and all that. But just once again, if you do need to turn off for a specific use case, then you can do it in this sort of way. So that's that, and then we also, okay, so that gets rid of the first error, but we also want to get rid of this second error. So that's the no shadow. So we can go ahead and we can just go ahead and click and write down no shadow here. So yeah, that's the tutorial on setting up TypeScript and ESLint with Prettier without using React. I hope it was helpful, and just to do a quick recap of what we did, we've essentially we installed TypeScript and ESLint globally. We created a new package .json. We installed all these other dev dependencies with ESLint, Prettier, TypeScript, and the plugins and configuration that we needed. We created this script here, this lint, so we could run the ESLint command on all the TypeScript extension types. We've configured the run commands for ESLint. We've pointed to that towards the TypeScript configuration, and that's why we had the in our TypeScript projects TS config that you'd have in any TypeScript project. You extended the Airbnb style guide so we can use good coding conventions for our JavaScript or TypeScript, and then we have this Prettier extensions to help us, write code, and it helps us format it and get us the right spacing and all that sort of stuff for us. And we've made it such that when you install it, it doesn't conflict with the ESLint. They work together, and we set up our a couple custom rules here, single quote, end of line. We've seen that you could add more, or you could use the standard ones from the settings, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And then obviously we've seen the rules in action. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, and thanks so much for watching.